Welcome to Be Undaunted. This is the podcast that helps you lead stronger, elevate your impact, and live with more energy.
I'm George Dahm, former Navy fighter pilot, Blue Angels flight leader, and corporate executive.
And I'm Tara Collingwood, performance dietitian to Olympians, CEOs, and everyday people that are just under pressure. If you're ready to grow, to strengthen your leadership, and to reclaim your energy.
If you want to feel more intentional, more capable, and yes, more undaunted, you're in the right place.
All right. Welcome to Be Undaunted. We are so thrilled to have an amazing guest that you lined up, George. So can't wait. Let's just get right to it.
All right, here we go. So today we're honored to welcome Captain Charlie Plumb, United States Navy retired. And I'm going to read his introduction because I don't want to miss anything that's on here. So Charlie grew up on a Kansas farm, graduated from the Naval Academy, and earned his wings of gold as a naval aviator flying the F-4 Phantom during the Vietnam War at the young age of 24. And after completing 74 combat missions, Charlie launched on his 75th mission on May 19th, 1967 from the USS Kitty Hawk. Just 5 days before he was scheduled to return home, his aircraft was struck by a surface-to-air missile over North Vietnam, and he and his radar intercept officer, Lieutenant J.G. Gary Anderson, both ejected safely but were captured almost immediately. What followed was a test of endurance few can imagine. For nearly 6 years, Charlie had no idea when or if he would return home. He spent the next 2,103 days, nearly 6 years, as a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. During that time, he endured torture, isolation, deprivation, and profound uncertainty. Yet, alongside his fellow POWs, he helped build a culture of trust, communication, faith, and mutual support that enabled most of them to not only survive, but to preserve their character under extraordinary pressure. Following his release in 1973 as Operation Homecoming, Charlie dedicated his life to helping others understand the lessons of adversity, resilience, gratitude, leadership, and hope. Charlie's the author of I'm No Hero, a POW story, and will include links to his website and resources in the show notes. Charlie, welcome to Be Undaunted.
George, thank you very much. A pleasure, truly, to be to you and Karen.
We're going to get into some specifics here about your shoot down and your 6 years as a POW, but I'd like to step back for a second and look at the big picture. So our podcast is called Be Undaunted, and when you hear that phrase, what are the qualities that come to mind for you? What do you think makes someone truly undaunted?
I think it's sticking with the focus. Undaunted to me means staying the course, regardless of what's happening to you. You can get wins from one way or another, and you can suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, but if you keep on going, I think you're undaunted.
I agree. And what do you think, though, is driving the key for someone to stay on course? In the military, we talk about mission. Is that sort of what you felt during your time there? That because you suffered through some real adversity.
Well, it's true, but I think you're right. The mission, your attitude towards the mission, your faithfulness towards your Creator, your honesty and integrity, and and honor. I think honor is a big part of staying the course. It's just the fact that, hey, you got a job to do, you got a North Star to follow, you have a particular method, mode, and purpose, and following that, I think, is really the key to being undaunted.
Yeah, terrific.
Wow. So, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. And, I always like to thank, and I have such respect for our servicemen and women. But I mean, I literally had goosebumps and chills and then I've read your book, I've read your bio, and as George is saying that, I'm still getting chills and goosebumps just thinking about what you have done and been through, and how you have come out of it. Let's take everyone back to, your 75th mission, 5 days from going home, and unfortunately, your luck ran out. And I can only imagine being captured so quickly. What do you remember from that day?
I'll tell you about the night before. I think that has some application to you and your audience. The night before I was shot down, a bunch of the guys got together in the ready room, and we were so excited about leaving the line, going home for a little R&R, and just 5 days to go, and we were there. Now, we had one technocrat in the squadron who would show up with this little handheld computer. He would have prefigured the probability that any one of us would be shot down and captured the next day. Popular guy.
Oh, right, I'm sure.
But it was all for fun. And so he brought out his list. Hey, there, Fred, you're looking pretty good there at .093. Charlie, you got to watch it. That's a point or something or other. And we laughed. It was fun. It was funny.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were so close to the end of our tour of duty, and we were so close to going home. And then, for whatever reason, the conversation took kind of a curious turn. And 7 or 8 guys, as I recall, were standing there in the ready room, and maybe it was because we were so close to the end. Maybe it's because we'd lost about a fourth of our squadron were killed and captured, and about a dozen airplanes, in the dirt or in the water. But the conversation turned, and we found ourselves asking each other, hey, okay, what happens if you get shot down and captured tomorrow? What then? To a man. I remember to a man, and we were young, virile, excited guys that were, out there doing what we really believed in. To a man, everybody admitted, hey, if I'm shot down and captured tomorrow, just get myself stuff together and send it home and tell my wife to get on with her life, because this is a mountain too high to climb. I'll never be able to survive this. And so I we'll just call it a day if I'm shot down tomorrow. And that's kind of the way we all felt, was that it would be worse than death to be caught and tortured and spend even 6 weeks in a prison camp. So that was my memory. The phone in my stateroom rang about 3 a.m. the next morning, and somebody had declared an alpha strike. This is the highest form of an attack, and I guess I'd only been on one other alpha strike, but this is three aircraft carriers and 5 Air Force bases, and we were all descending on targets in North Vietnam. It was a big deal. I was the schedules officer for the squadron, and so it was up to me to schedule who goes in what planes and who's the lead and all this stuff. I was very junior. I was the most junior guy in the squadron, and so I normally flew on the skipper's wing because I was the most junior, he was the most senior. So we launched early morning, rendezvoused at about 30,000 feet, plugged into an airborne tanker, and pointed the nose of the airplane towards the beach. The target was just south of Hanoi, and at the time, it was the most heavily defended city in the world. They had all kinds of SAM, surface-to-air missiles, all kinds of anti-aircraft fire, 57 millimeter, 37 millimeter, the big stuff, and small arms fire, which if you got too low, that was going to get you. So, and MiGs, we had MiGs all over the place. The enemy's best airplane. So in we went to the target. About, 10, 15 miles before we got to the target, we were hit by a SAM. Exploded some 12,000 pounds of jet fuel we had on board, sent that bird just topsy-turvy. This is a big airplane. And it was just falling like a stone towards the ground. I ejected my backseater, my co-pilot, my radar intercept officer, Gary Anderson, ejected. Our parachutes open, and in 90 seconds, I went from king of the skies to scum of the earth.
Wow.
And that's the beginning of the saga of Charlie Plumb.
Oh, my goodness. That's eye-opening. Clearly, you had to, at some point there, the key to persevering through adversity is accepting the reality that you're in. And so when was it that you realized that this wasn't just going to be a few days, that your life had fundamentally changed?
You're absolutely right. I did not accept reality, or at least for the first couple of days. I was in this unbelievable state. I thought I was having this nightmare, when am I going to wake up? And then I was a very positive person, even through my youth. I was always, believing that, things are going to work out for the best. And maybe that too was a bit of denial of the reality of it all. But it kept me going. It kept me focused, kept me believing and hoping that, the day would come. But days wore into weeks, weeks wore into months, months wore into years. And, I think maybe the reality really set in about halfway through this saga. This was, you would remember, George, Carr, you wouldn't know this, but there were peace talks that were started about halfway through the Vietnam War. And they couldn't decide on a round table or square table. It finally got started. And now we didn't know all this was happening, but because the president wanted to offer, some kind of accommodation to the enemy, he stopped the bombing. Stop the bombing, and we'll talk about peace. But for us, who had been encouraged by the bombing, even when it came close to the prison camps, we at least knew that, hey, we're still fighting this war, we're going to win this war, and we're going to be set free one of these days. But when the bombing stopped, I found out there's something worse than going to war in a country you can't pronounce and don't understand. Something worse than, even being a prisoner of war. What's worse than all that is being forgotten. And it felt, and we all felt, that we had been forgotten.
Wow.
And I think that's really where, when it all sort of brought home the fact that, hey, we're going to be here for a while, and maybe we'll never go home. And so I think if there was a point that we faced reality when the bombing stopped, and it was really quiet, around there for a while, and we were afraid that we'd been forgotten. Either the war was over or whatever had to happen. We weren't home, and we expected to be home when that bombing stopped.
Yeah.
So that was probably the point.
Wow.
So when you are dealing with this, I mean, you said this is halfway through, so this was 3 years in. You've already been there for 3 years. You have so bombing stopped. You have no idea when, if, how do you keep hope alive? How did you decide that you wanted to continue down this path? And, how do you keep that idea of I am going to survive and I will be captured eventually?
I'm a big believer in self-fulfilling prophecy. I grew up in Kansas in Little Beach School, and springtime came, and I wanted to go fishing, so I told my teacher I had a headache. It was a walk home, okay? And it was, I don't know, maybe a 15-minute walk to my house to get my fishing gear, okay? By the time I got to my house, I had the worst migraine I've ever had in my life. And so it was sort of to admit that I might never go home, to admit that I might die there, was sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I decided, if I have any control of the way I'm thinking about the future, it's not going to ring the death toll. I'm going to live through this. And so it was that positive attitude, I think, that kept hope.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of Viktor Frankl. I mean, obviously his book, Man's Search for Meaning. I've quoted that book and his work so many times I can't even remember, and the teachings we do when people are talking about purpose. And what he says that just has resonated with me so many times in my life is those who have a why to live can get through almost any how.
Yeah.
You had to have had that why. So what connection? I mean, what was that why that kept you going?
One of my professors at the Naval Academy had worked with Viktor Frankl, so
Oh my
I
gosh.
I knew his story. I kind of understood that everybody needs a why,
Yeah.
and you can come up with a house all day long, but if you can't come up with a why, a purpose in life, basically, and that's what Frankl talks about.
Right.
Is having that purpose. And I believe it's true with all of us, leaders, followers, whatever your age or profession, we all need that focus. We need the why. Now, part of development of the why was the leadership that we had in the prison camp. And it was the best leadership I've ever seen anywhere. And our leaders gave us the why. Jim Stockdale was the guy. He was one of my heroes, and one of the reasons that I think that I survived and even thrived through this. He came up with a motto, and the motto is easy, 3 words: return with honor. Okay, he didn't say return with victory. That was not it. Return with honor, and he said every decision you make in this prison camp, every answer to the enemy, everything you think about has to be seen through this prism of return with honor. And I had the great opportunity of going down to San Diego at 32nd Street Naval Station, getting aboard a destroyer and bringing it up to Port Hueneme here for to bring this destroyer to life. And the name of the destroyer is the USS Stockdale. And on the very bow of the destroyer, it says, return with honor. We commissioned that ship with 2,000 people in the audience, and the ship comes to life. And I spent 2 days from San Diego, rode on the ship with my wife and one of my sons from San Diego up to Port Hueneme and talked to the crew and the ship about Jim Stockdale and return with honor, and how that gave us the purpose, the raison d'etre. It gave us the meaning to live.
Boy, I'm so glad that you referenced Admiral Stockdale, because unfortunately for so many Americans, the snapshot they got of him was in the vice presidential debate when he was put up as Ross Perot's running mate. And unfortunately, they have a perception that is so off base, right? One of the truly great Americans ever, Medal of Honor winner, and your words certainly capture very well what he means to all of us that served. Charlie, in your public speaking, you described for people a little bit about, what it was like being in captivity. Sort of, I don't know that there may have been any typical day, but just sort of let people, what was it like on any given day? What was your routine like?
They woke us up with kind of a bell, and of course we had no idea of the time. We had no clocks, no watches, but it was before daybreak. And so we would get up, and the first interaction we had with them would be the first meal of the day, which came, we figured, around 8 or 8:30. And so for those first couple of hours, we spent primarily exercising. We had quite a routine, and guys did push-ups and set-ups and running in place and isometrics and anything we could do within that little prison cell. And of course, being Navy fighter pilots in the air crews, we challenged everybody else. How many push-ups can you guys do? How many sit-ups can you guys do? The push-up record was over 2,000 straight push-ups. The sit-up record was over 10,000. I counted 10,000 sit-ups, cold blood.
I can't even imagine that.
The best record of all, Barry Bridger Air Force guy, had been a gymnast. He could do 27 handstand push-ups. He would go to a handstand and he did push-ups 27 straight. He challenged any of us to do it. And a lot of us had bloody noses from trying that. So that was kind of our morning routine. And your first bowl of rice came, we figured, about 10 o'clock. The second bowl of rice was probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we had 4 hours between the two meals, and then we had a 20-hour stretch with nothing to eat.
Mm.
And the rice would usually come with a little broth of some kind. We never could identify what it was exactly, but I didn't have enough protein, or at least we didn't have enough meat. It would fill a coffee cup for a year. It was just very, very little meat. But we survived, and turned out that rice is a pretty perfect food. It has a lot of the nutrients that you really need to survive. So they gave us about a little over a liter of water a day, which wasn't much for the big guys in the summertime. And so we were always pretty thirsty. About noontime came, and all the guards went to siesta and left us alone. That's when we all came out of our corners and started communicating with all the other guys. Now, I was in solitary confinement for a little while. A lot of the guys were, in fact, the record was 4.5 years in solitary confinement. But we always had some kind of communication with the guys in the cell next door, or if you had, we would drop notes off to each other. And so that was a very important time because the community was vital. Our communication system, the leadership that we had, the team that we put together was vital. It was life and death, I think, to all of us, to know that somebody else was there who cared about me. And a number of those guys think I saved their life, and I know that they saved mine on many occasions. Second meal about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and usually after that, depending on the prison camp you were in and the cell you were in, we'd have a university. We had the Hanoi University, HU.
Oh my goodness!
We studied anything that anybody knew anything about, and a lot of things that many people knew nothing about.
Uh-huh.
I taught a course in sailing. Okay, you two know Navy. Most Navy guys know how to swim, and a lot of us know how to sail. All right, and so I'm tapping on a wall, with our tap code, our secret code, just taps on a wall, teaching a couple of Air Force guys in the other room how to sail. And here's how you come about, and here's how you tack, and all this stuff. And because I'd sailed at the Naval Academy, and it was all just really kind of a way of wasting time, I thought. How do you teach a guy to sail that you can't see or hear or draw diagrams or anything else? About 3 or 4 weeks after I came home from Vietnam, I get this call from this guy. Charlie, I just rented a boat. I can sail.
Oh my goodness.
So, but guys that had most all of us had some bachelor's degree. A lot of guys had master's. We even had some PhDs in the prison camp, and they would teach courses from their college days that some of us had not had. In fact, when we came home, the University of Maryland gave guys credit for the instruction we had without books or PowerPoints or computers or anything else. Just because we were under that kind of pressure, that organized, and had the time to learn all these things. At night was special. It was showtime every night. At least if you had a roommate, you had showtime. Each one of us would tell about a movie that we had seen, or sometimes it was a book that we had read. I'll never forget. I was with Charlie Zuhowski. He a very bright guy, a Navy pilot, and he told the story of Dr. Zhivago. Well, that's a that's a pretty intricate movie, book, story. I think the first year I was with him, it was like a 5-minute thing. That's all he could remember about Dr. Zhivago. But every day he would lay back on his board bed and think about that movie, trying to remember pieces of it. And by the end of my tour in Vietnam, in the prison camps in Vietnam, he was telling the story. It was a 3-hour spectacular. And of course, the rating had gone from PG to X. So,
of course.
what happens?
So you sound so incredibly positive right now. The typical day in camp sounds like it could be a day at a camp for. I mean, this was a POW camp. This sounds like it could have been a day at camp for people. We had teachers who were teaching and professors and and all this stuff. But I can imagine that. I mean, I know that you're probably making it sound a lot better than it was, obviously, but were there other prisoners who struggled? That, I mean, I'm sure not every day was as positive and full of hope as you're making us believe at this moment. But were there particular people, too, that you guys had to say, come on, and teach them about finding meaning and purpose and how to survive?
That's very true. But with this caveat, I would say that if you talk to any of my buddies, any of the ex-POWs, they would say pretty much the same thing, is that once you got into the routine, once you realize that, that you're just going to take this thing a day at a time, a step at a time, and you're going to try to make the most out of this experience by learning from other people, by humor. We would tell jokes and come up with all kinds of, phenomenal stories. We had birthday parties, as a matter of fact. That was a big deal to have a birthday party. And they were fabulous. Big plates of all kinds of food. We'd have an orchestra, there playing for us. We'd have, for the Navy guys, Georgia would appreciate this. The birthday cake was a huge aircraft carrier, okay? And with little steam catapults and all this stuff. And then when we sang happy birthday at the very end, these naked ladies would pop out of the cake. And of course,
I love the imagination here.
Oh, yeah. And of course, it was all in our minds. We're tapping on walls, telling the guy next door, hey, here's your birthday party. Hope you enjoy it. And so it was these kinds of things. Now, was there depression? Yeah. Were there guys who didn't make it? Yeah, there were. And were there guys that inspired us all? Let me tell you a story of Mike Christian. Mike and I were in the same cell. He was from Alabama and didn't have shoes, so I think he was 11 years old. Very, very poor kid.
Wow.
He enlisted in the Navy, was bright, and so he got into flight training and became a radar interceptor, a bombardier. He wasn't the pilot; he was the backseater, and got shot down. It was with me, okay, but a very patriotic guy. And one of the things that he had done was he found a little rag of paper, fashioned a needle out of a stick of bamboo, and sewed in that paper the American flag. We would stand every morning and salute our American flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance, which of course was another thing, that kept us going and gave us hope. And then, of course, we had to hide this flag from the enemy. They came in one time with a real serious investigation and went through our room and found his flag. And pulled Mike Christian out of there and beat him up pretty good and tossed him back in at night. It beat him for several hours. It was nighttime by the time he came back. And he was all beaten up, and we tried to clean up his wounds as best we could. He didn't talk much, but he just kind of positioned himself over in the corner of the prison cell. And I was really kind of concerned, that the guy might really, really be depressed. He was hurting, obviously. Physically in pain. And then, 30 minutes later, I looked over there, and there he is, fashioning another needle and sewing another American flag.
What?
So, we went through some tough times, but we supported each other, and we kept the faith and kept the hope, and turned it around.
In your presentations, you talk a bit about, as you mentioned here today, that how important community was and the connection with the other POWs and so forth. Could you tell our listeners just a little bit about the time where you came out of after a torture session and we learned, and thanks to the lessons that we got from you, we all got to go through training in order to be prepared for that experience should it happen. And one of the lessons that they teach you is, hey, if they want to get information out of you, they're gonna get it to you, but from torture. And how many guys I know back in Korea as well were tried to be John Wayne, and they felt like if they gave up any information that they had betrayed their country. Can you tell a little bit about coming out of a torture session where you felt that way and how you were communicated to one of the leaders that was next to your cell?
Absolutely. The torture session really, probably the most depression I ever had and the worst I ever felt about myself was through the torture session. To begin with, every one of us felt guilty about failing in our mission. And I know that probably sounds crazy, to anybody that hasn't been there and done that. But, we were so proud, Top Gun fighter pilots were out there accomplishing this mission, go fight, win. And then when you were shot down, you blamed yourself. And then being captured, again, I was supposed to have escaped. And then surrender, okay? And as you know, surrender is not in the Top Gun playbook. You're not taught to surrender, and we all felt guilty about that. But we did, I didn't know that the other guys felt guilty about this too. It was a while. The first guy I communicated with, Bob Shoemaker, he was much senior than me. He was a lieutenant commander. I was a lieutenant junior grade. He'd been there for 2 years when I got there. He was there over 8 years total. And so, I felt like that he was supreme. In fact, he had been an astronaut candidate. He had orders to NASA when he was shot down. He was that kind of guy. So he was way up here and I'm way down here. I did not want to tell him that I had broken, that I'd given them more than name, rank, serial number, date of birth. And finally, when I got to know him a little bit better, just tapping on walls and tugging on wires and communicating with this code that we had, I said, I must confess to you, Shu, that I broke. And he sent back to me, hell, Plumber, he said, everybody broke. There's not a man in this prison camp that was as strong as he wanted to be. So pull up your big boy pants, Plumber. We got a war to fight. And that really turned things around. But even when we go into a torture session and we gave them more than we wanted to give them, and we would come back despondent and depressed and even a little guilty, that we'd given more than we wanted to. And the senior officers in Stockdale came up with this. He said, when you go to a torture session, come back, get on the wall. That meant communicate. Go to the common wall that you have with another prison cell and start communicating, tapping on the wall with this code and tell them exactly what happened. Now, his reasoning, at least what he gave to us, his reasoning was, hey, because that guy's going to get tortured too, and he needs to know what you said so you can, validate that. Because if you told him lies, he needs to know the lies that you told the enemy. But what Stockdale, in his unbelievable wisdom, was really saying was, it's confession time, man. You're in the box at a Catholic church, and you better tell the priest what happened. Because confession is good for the soul. And that was Stockdale's wisdom, is just allowing us to open up, to show everybody, show the community our weakness, And when they saw that weakness, then they would expose their weakness, and suddenly you had a very, very tight community.
Wow. Fascinating how you all were able to communicate like this, and the forethought that he had to say, no, we need to be full transparency. Don't try to hide it. If and when you broke, it's okay. We're all in this together, right?
And how many times in daily life, do
Yeah.
we have that, what we call prison thinking,
Mm.
that the cell was not 8 feet by 8 feet, it's 8 inches. Your prison is right here in your mind, that you don't want to ever seem less than people think you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in today's world of social media and having our lives exposed so much more than, they used to be. Everyone's trying to show the best and the brightest of their life,
That's,
right?
that's true.
I want to ask about reimmersion into life. So you are released, you are, brought back home, and what was that like? I mean, what was it like to not hang on to so much bitterness, to not hang on to resentment, to realize that 6 years had passed? I have so many questions about how you took those first few steps forward after release.
My repatriation was a wonderful period of my life. It started out with a little bit of a downer.
Mm.
When I came home, I tried to call my wife. I'd married my high school sweetheart the day after I graduated from Annapolis, matter of fact, under the Arch of Swords. It was a beautiful one.
Wow.
And she hung on for 5 years.
Ugh.
And so I tried to call her when I got to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. That was our first stop coming home. Well, she had gone. Called my folks back in Kansas. My father was so broken up he couldn't talk to me. He passed the phone to my mom, and I'll never forget her words. She said, "Son, I'd give 10 years of my life if I didn't have to tell you this. Your wife hung on for 5 years, and then just 6 months ago, she filed for divorce.
Ugh.
She's engaged to be married to another guy."
Mm.
Well, another blow to me. And in fact, I'm curled up in the fetal position in a hospital bed at Great Lakes Naval Hospital in Chicago. And, thinking to myself, but what could be worse than this? Started to blame everybody I could think of and feel sorry for myself and get into this little pity party of my own and play this victim role. That lasted, I don't know, maybe an hour. And then I thought to myself, did you learn nothing in that prison camp? Was this all for naught, that you didn't learn how to overcome challenges? Man, pick up your big boy pants, man. We got a life to live. One of the first psychiatrists that I interviewed with, because they thought we would be zombies coming home.
Yeah.
I mean, how can you spend 6, 7, 8.5 years in isolation in prison camps and ever come back normal? And so one of the first doctors I saw at Clark Air Force Base was a psychiatrist. And he said, "I heard about your wife." "Yeah." He said, how you feel about that? It's all these psychiatrists tell you that. How do you feel about that? Well, I said, I'm disappointed. I was counting on spending the rest of my life with her, and, all of my plans was to have her beside my side. It's not going to happen now. He said, you don't seem to have any, physical, emotional response to all this. He said, if you can go back to your hospital room and kick on the door and break in the wall and scream and shout, we'll understand. He said, because you have the right to be bitter. I said, Doc, I have the right to have diarrhea. Thank you, but I choose not to be bitter. So.
Wow. So you're telling me that the pity party you had for yourself after being in captivity for 6 years lasted an hour.
Well, I'm not sure that was the only pity party that
But
No,
still, that is incredible.
well,
And it speaks to everything that you've told us so far, that you had community, you had connection, you had a purpose, you had meaning, you had, but you did that, and your fellow prisoners of war did that.
no, it really is true. Is that as you know, I'm a motivational speaker, and I've spoken about 5,000 times in the last 53 years.
Hmm.
And I stand up and talk to an audience and tell them this story, and then I say very honestly to them, "Hey, appreciate your being here, but oh, by the way, I'm talking to myself." You know?
This is my therapy.
Exactly. This is my therapy. Leave me alone. But it is true. I proved to myself in the prison. I proved to myself, but really validated a lot of things that I thought I knew even before I got there. Okay. The whole process, the Viktor Frankl's process, man's search for meaning process, the whole idea that it's not what happens around you. That's the important part. The important part is how you respond.
Exactly.
And as long as you accept that responsibility and not blame anybody else and go into this pity party of your own and assume this victimhood that's so prevalent today. I mean, to see anybody has some kind of specialty in life, it's that they are the victim of somebody else. And in doing that, they give away control of their life. They give it to whoever they're blaming. And so I have a tough time saying this to my kids. They don't believe this, but when I am offended by somebody, okay, I understand this is a two-way street. I have to accept the offense to make it offensive. And if they say something nasty to me and I don't accept it, I don't listen to it, I don't internalize it, then the offense does not happen. And I just go off on my way. And I think that's a tough thing because it seems like in this day and age, everybody wants to be a victim. And you see it in politics, you see it in schools, you see it in families. Everybody wants to point their finger at somebody else. And when you point your finger at somebody else, then you give them control of your life. So
yeah, great lesson. So many of our folks in our audience are leaders, and I'd like you to share with us a little bit about your experience in the camp with regard to leadership, because you obviously had a chain of command starting with, I guess he was Commander Stockdale when he was shot down, right? He was the Air Wing commander, so commander.
He had been promoted to captain, but he hadn't pin him on. So yeah, he was actually a commander in the prison camp.
So you had a leadership structure that was based on rank, but how about where did you see leaders, regardless of rank, that influenced others to make tomorrow a better day?
Interesting question, because as it turned out, that war was so long that the guys who were shot down I was promoted twice while I was there, but I didn't know it. Okay, and so the guys that were shot down as lieutenants or lieutenant commanders were there for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years. Other guys were shot down and actually had been promoted as they were supposed to, and they outranked these guys. One of my Naval Academy graduates came in. He was a lieutenant commander. I was still a JG. And he wanted me to carry out the honey bucket. I see. It was all a joke. Rank was essential for us. But sometimes the guys who had been there the longest actually took up the leader positions, and the guys who were shot down near the end of the war and didn't have the experience would have to abdicate their leadership position to somebody who knew more about it.
Yeah.
But one of the best leaders in a prison camp was a sailor. We were all fighter pilots. A sailor in a prison camp? This guy had fallen off his ship, the Canberra, the cruiser Canberra, in the middle of the night. And so as he fell off and got captured, and the enemy did not know what to do with this guy, but we would have these contests, just for something to do. We would pass around a questionnaire just to while away the time. Who's the oldest here? Who's got the most kids back home? One time we had, just for fun, what we call the high-fast, low-slow contest. To try to determine what fighter pilot had jumped out of his jet highest and fastest, we'd look going out lowest and slowest. And Carl, you already got the punchline here, though. This kid won the low-slow contest because he fell off the Canberra cruiser at 12 feet at 15 knots. But anyway, this guy became quite a leader because he memorized the names of all of us, 254 guys in that particular kit. He memorized these names. And then he memorized our identifier or social security number. And then this is over a 2-year period. He memorized our next of kin and hometowns, and even some of the telephone numbers of each of the wives of each of the prisoners. Well, when the peace treaty started and the enemy decided, as proof of their lenient and humane treatment, they would send somebody home early. Well, the first guy they went to was John McCain. His dad at the time, Admiral J.S. McCain, was CINCPAC in charge of the Vietnam War. And John said, no way, I'd never embarrass my father by doing that. Never give up on the guys who need American medical aid here. Send somebody else home. And he got beaten up because he refused to go home early. So our senior guy sent the message to the sailor. Son, Doug Hegdall's this guy's name. I want you to volunteer to go home first. Hegdall sent back, sir, with all due respect, I'd rather stay here with the team. I want to march home with you guys. I want to be a part of the celebration. Our senior man said, that's not an option. Here's the direct order, shove off. And the sailor said, aye, aye, sir. And he came home. Now, but he had all these names memorized.
Yeah.
So rather than going on a vacation, or whatever, he started to travel. West Coast to East, to every hometown he'd memorized. Dialed every telephone number he'd memorized. Spoke to every wife he knew of to tell her that her husband was alive. So, showed us all a thing or two about leadership.
Yeah.
Is the fact that you take care of your people. But a little more on leadership, because I know you got a lot of people who are leaders. And my definition is, hey, if you affect the lives of those around you, you are a leader. So makes pretty much all of us leaders. Stockdale had a significant, definite purpose, okay? Return with honor. That's Stockdale. And he drilled that into everybody's head in every way he could, in telling stories, in writing. He wrote little epistles. His Greek philosopher was Epictetus. Epictetus.
Yep.
Yeah. This was a Greek slave, as I recall. Anyway, and Stockdale loved this guy. And he would quote this guy, over and over, trying to prove to us that return with honor was our motto and our mantra and our way of life. And so leaders have a definite purpose. Make that a big time goal for your people, and then hammer it into their head with stories and mottos and slogans in any way that you can, and then live the purpose. I think a lot of leaders run into problems in thinking that that they're the ringmaster and they don't need to follow their own instruction. And so, if you in fact can establish a purpose and then drum that in to people, of course, care about your people, and then live the purpose. I think that's the key to leadership.
Wow. I'm drying my tears from that story of the sailor that went home and went from coast to coast to let everyone know that you guys were alive and that he memorized all those things. I'm still stuck on that. I'm catching up for here.
We have a reunion about every year now, and we've done pretty well. 592 men came home. They thought we'd be in baskets. They thought we'd be vegetables. 592 have produced 18 generals, 7 admirals, 2 ambassadors, 2 United States senators, a bunch of congressmen. We have a governor, several mayors. We have a vice presidential candidate and a presidential candidate from 591 guys. And they're telling us today we're healthier mentally and physically than if we hadn't been shot down. Figure that
Wow.
out. I think there's great value. I was approached by Ron Howard, the movie producer guy, about 5 years ago, who wanted to tell my story. And he spent 5 years and about $5 million on a documentary that should be out this fall or next spring on the story. And that's primarily the message is you got a bunch of knuckle dragging fighter pilots that go out there and having fun and shooting things. And oh, by the way, a bunch of them get shot down. And they go from king of the skies to scum of the earth. And how in the world they come back and have much less PTSD than the guys who didn't get shot down. It just went through the normal thing.
Well, it's one word, and you've taught it to us. It's mindset.
Mindset.
It's that mindset of I'm not going to be a victim. And, so my gosh, you are incredible. I'm in awe of your story and all 591 of the POWs from Vietnam who have been able to teach so many people how to be undaunted and the power of resilience.
Well, I appreciate both of you telling my story and getting it out. A message that is obviously parallel to the Undaunted message. This is pretty much, and there's nothing new about my story. People have been undaunted since the beginning of time. So,
I think there's a lot unique and new about your story, my friend.
Well, we always say that these lessons that you've been sharing with us, Charlie, universal lessons come out of extreme experiences, right, with unforgiving consequences, and you've certainly embodied the lessons of being undaunted today. I don't know whether it was which POW I heard this from, but I've heard the comment made that, hey, realize we weren't chosen for this. We weren't selected for this. I mean, you talked about, Doug Hegdahl, as well as you and your guys in the ready room the night before. I mean, it just happened to you. And I think it speaks volumes about the strength that each of us have that can come forth whenever we face adversity, and that, just the average person has more in them, I think, than they really believe.
Absolutely right, George. And I appreciate that analysis because so many cases when we run into a big time challenge in life, we didn't choose the challenge.
Right.
You get in a car wreck, you diagnosed with cancer, or you go through a divorce, and you think, why me? Why me, Lord? Why? What did I do to deserve this? And you got to kind of get rid of that whole idea because life is full of challenges. This.
Yeah.
Dr. Norman Vincent Peale was one of my. I spoke on the stage with him several times, and he used to tell a story about a guy saying, "I got so many problems." Peale would say, "You want to go somewhere where nobody has any problems?" Yeah. Tell me this place. He says it's a cemetery about 2 blocks away.
That's right. Well, certainly, I can tell from the lessons that you share with. I think it was John McCain that said something about, the experience was really tough and so forth, but I wouldn't trade it for anything else because it helped me become the person that I am today. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
no question. And again, that's parallel with most challenges we face. When you go through the challenge, when you're diagnosed with cancer, when you lose a loved one, all these things, your first thought, human nature, your emotion is that it's going to be a negative experience. And yet, if you apply the basics and get through it and then can look back on it, it can actually be a very learning, growing, building your character experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great place to start wrapping up. Tara, do you have any other takeaways you're going to take with you from today?
Yeah, well, first is that men never stop competing against each other, as evidenced with I wrote it down, 2,000 push-ups, 10,000 sit-ups, and 27 handstand push-ups that are still on record, which I just love. But, to me, I wrote down a couple of things as you were talking that were critical to your survival, and one was the routine. There was a routine each day of, we did our exercises, we had our rice, we did this, we had our communication. I mean, there's routine. The social connection, without that social connection and the communication that all of you had, you lifted each other up. We cannot speak enough about community and how important it is to rely on those around us who love us and lift us up on a regular basis. And that was, evidenced by the community that you guys created within the worst possible circumstances that anyone can imagine. So yeah, those were my big takeaways is, rely on routine of life, community, social connection, and it will get you through.
Yeah, that's good.
Very true.
And, for me, Charlie, I'm just so proud to wear the same wings of gold that you wore. And to listen to your story and the fact that for you guys, the war wasn't over when you got shot down. You just took the war to a different place. And every day for 6, 7, 8 years, you got up in the morning and you were, okay, what are we going to do today to fight the enemy that's here? And just incredible stuff. Thanks so much for your time. What couple words that you'd like to leave our folks with, and then we'll wrap it up?
To all of your audience, if you can believe that you still have choices, regardless of what happens to you, you still have choices in the way you respond to every situation in life. A lot of us give away those choices by blaming other people and feeling sorry for ourselves and going into this mode. And, I want you folks to know that if you want more information about me and my message, got a lot of stuff on my website, charlieplumb.com. And I am very open and very transparent with everything that I do. I know, George, you can probably understand this better than most who haven't worn their wings of gold, but you can identify with my story probably better than most. And Tara, if you understand the Navy thing, I don't know how many people know much about you, but you're a Navy supporter, and I appreciate that. So you can identify with what goes on, not just with in the combat situation, but the folks at home that live and love and pray for us who have borne the battle, and so it all works for good.
Yeah, we have a saying that we recruit the sailor, but the entire family serves.
Absolutely,
for sure.
No question. We're getting better about that.
Yes,
boy,
indeed.
that my poor mother. When I left home, she had a wonderful head, black hair, a beautiful person. When I came home 7 years later, it was totally gray. And I apologized to her, I think, every month until the day she died, that I had made a decision at age 17 and didn't even think about how it might affect her or anybody else in my life. Hey, man, I'm going to go to the Naval Academy. And yet she would respond by saying, son, please don't apologize. I would never have wanted you to do anything else.
Wow.
Return with honor. You certainly accomplished the mission, Charlie. Thanks so much. Tara, would you read us out?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say the same thing is, we couldn't end on a better note of that idea of return with honor. And you certainly did. And Charlie, on behalf of George and I, but I mean, just the United States of America, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your service, for the lessons that you continue to teach through your book, through doing podcasts like this, through your speaking engagements. I mean, it really is incredible how you have chosen to spend your life after captivity, because you could have easily gone and lived on a beach somewhere with a umbrella drink, but you've chosen to have your therapy on stage in front of many. So thank you.
I'm still thinking about the beach and the umbrella drink. So.
You're like, darn it, should have done that.
Maybe in my future.
Maybe in your future. There you go. You've earned it. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, follow, subscribe for free, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening right now. We would love if you can rate and comment and share this episode with everyone.
Absolutely. And Charlie, we'll have to have you back because we want to hear your stories about when you were one of the early guys putting together that Navy fighter weapons school, Top Gun. There's some good stories there.
Oh, it's a fun story. Well, thank the two of you for helping me to tell my story to your audience. It means a lot to me, and I'm very honored that you would take the time and the effort to analyze my story and to put it in terms that everybody can understand. So thanks for that.
You bet. Okay. Well, until next time, everybody, we look forward to you joining us again. And until then, be undaunted. Bye-bye.